Live now. That's
Okay.
okay. Okay, live and recording. I was asking Iris if she saw that countdown that I see, but apparently she does not. Peace and love, y'all. For those who are already in the room, Tiersa, because Tiersa is going to be joining us shortly. Hey, sis, thank you for being here. We got Michelle. We have Chavi. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that right. Esther, Amber, Peace, Rebecca. Yes, and Rebecca said her copy of Untigering arrived yesterday, and she can't wait to dive in. So I have
Awesome.
Iris Chen with me. Iris, welcome to our field trip.
Thank you so much. Excited to talk with you all.
Yes, yes. So Iris and I, as I mentioned on the podcast episode, Iris and I actually spoke last year, like maybe November or something of last year. And, divine timing, it just feels like a really um, ripe, RIPE time to have this conversation for lots of different reasons. And one of the primary ones for me is, as Iris and I were chatting before we got in, before we went live, was that a lot of the conversation around unschooling and deschooling and really just a more organic consent-based way of being with our children, a lot of that then brings up how we can be in community with the people before us, our elders who are still in our lives. Peace to Mari, um, who don't understand this. And so the pushback is not just against us, but also in direct ways that they deal with our kids that we used to figure out how to be all right with, and then we stopped, right? So I know that so much of what Iris talks about is from that cultural perspective of not just looking at it in this little box of like, well, my kid's going to learn whatever they want and they're going to be free. It don't work like that, right? So Iris, I wanted to start there, if that's cool, to just kind of touch on what are some of the ways that you have experienced and can speak to that multi-generational element of this type of work. Yeah.
Yeah, it is so complicated. I have to say that for me, because a lot of like this deconstruction and a lot of the unlearning that I was doing while I was miles away from my family. So I was living in China at the time. All my family is pretty much here in the States. And so that really did give me some freedom to sort of sort things out on my own, like figuring out what was important for me and my family, just having that distance. Even though it was hard, in other ways, I lacked the support of my family and
Yeah.
community around me. But it was also, a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because I had to sift through a lot of, my family values and my cultural values to figure out, okay, what is it that is really meaningful for me and my family? Living it as like an Asian American in China, it's just like a weird identity crisis, right? So I was neither like a Chinese local, nor was I like, completely a foreigner either. And so needing to navigate and really choose for myself, okay, what does it mean for me and my family to be Asian Americans in this space that I'm in right now? And so
Yes.
I know that for me, that was helpful in just giving me the space to really decide for myself and my family what was important.
Yeah.
And then I moved back to the States and near my family a couple of years ago. And I think just navigating that part is, again, not approaching it from a very, like, maybe approaching everything from an unschoolish mindset, in terms of I'm figuring things out for me and my family, and you get to figure things out for you and your family. So
Hmm.
even though maybe the way I'm doing things, it like feels like it's in tension with the way my parents did it or the way my siblings are doing it, like learning how to sit with that tension in a way that's not like there's one way to do this. There's like
Yes.
like I'm the only one with the right answers, but like allowing them their own process, being confident in my own like way of being and my own family's way of being. And I think like when I'm standing in that truth, like the rest of my family can learn to respect those boundaries,
Yeah.
where I'm not like forcing my ideas on them either.
Totally. And I wanna pause there because there are two major things that you said that I wanna name and like, pull out of the pieces. So the one thing is the distance, right? So like if you can create the distance, and we're fully aware that not everyone can, and there are times certainly in my life when we couldn't. I also know from that experience that distance can mean different things. So in our case, similar to y'all, we went back to Jamaica, and my partner Chris and I both left as children. So very much the difference in that we were not Jamaican the way that is Jamaican when you live there, and yet we're not. And we also left as children. All of these other factors. We're not American. Our children were born in this, and then when we moved to the U.S., we moved to South Florida, which is like little Jamaica. So we didn't really get a lot of like conventional American culture until way later, and it was still very much through a Caribbean lens. So distance can look like a few things. It can look like geographical, but it can also look like distancing yourself from curriculum. It might also look because for example, with curriculum, even though your kids are doing this thing and you're the person who has to enforce it. I know when my kids were in elementary school, grandparents were involved in everything. If they got a good grade or something, or a star, all of those things were reinforcing that you're good, you're doing great. So, what I want y'all to think about, if you're not in a position to go to China or Jamaica or even another city over, what are some of the ways that you can create distance from you and the family norms? Because it could be something like going to grandma's house every Sunday. Maybe you do that once a month while you're sorting through your own things instead of every week, right? There are other things that I want us to think about in terms of distance. The second thing that Iris said that I find so powerful when you said that is that you were also doing your own unschooling and recognizing that as even as much thought as you gave to your way, right? And as right as that way was, it was still your way. And so the learning to be with people where they are, not from a space of trying to convince or changing them, but holding your space in a way that demands, and not every time, not in every instance, but certainly enough to move you forward, right? Because it's people who are not always in positions of power, women, by POC. There are lots of ways where we can just, oh well, but learning to stand in your shit often is an invitation for people to say, oh, maybe there is something else, or maybe my way isn't the only thing. Did you? And it sounds like you found that as well, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally resonate with how you like wrap that all up. And we just recently went to visit my in-laws up north in the Bay Area, and like they're pretty hands off. They're not like so much in our business, but I think there are opportunities for us to interact with them where they can notice that something is different, and like just the fruit of what we're sowing into our kids. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, we're noticing this about your kids. And they see the positive fruit, like because we've had that time to invest in it and like really build that into our family, where we're not always in each other's business, but then we can go and
Yeah.
after a period of time for them to see like what
Yes,
is
the fruit of
happening.
that. I love that you worded it like that, because that's what it is. It's not necessarily a specific thing, like much of this work that someone can say somewhat prescriptively that this is the thing that you do. It really is a lot of seeing the things that are happening and learning to trust the process yourself, learning to trust yourself and trust the process and your kids, right? There's so many pieces when we talk about multi-generational learning and unlearning. Sometimes I find that the things that I started to unlearn are also how I support my adults, the people in their 60s and 70s and all of that, in unlearning too. So it's not through something I read somewhere, it's just like life experience. Oh, my kid told me this, and it sounds like that feeling I got is probably similar to the feeling that you're getting. Um, like those sort of things, and that's the thing to create distance from too. The idea that my kid's job is to make sure that my parents or whoever are comfortable and understand them and feel good. That's another thing that we learn to create distance from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think there's like, especially within the Asian culture, there's definitely, respect for the elders and all that stuff. And so, just learning how to navigate that in a little ways. Like we just went to visit my mom the other day, and in the Asian culture, it's really important to say their family title, even more important than just saying hi.
Mm,
You don't have to say hi, but you have to call them by their title or whatever. And so that's not something that my kids necessarily know or understand culturally. So there are ways that we can teach them certain things without it being coercive, and without it being like, you have to do this or grandma will be upset. It can be like, this is what it means in our culture, and we can try it, but if you forget, that's okay. We'll just
yeah.
keep on learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like just like in your book, there was so much in Untigering in your book that for me was really an invitation for our children to learn about a lot of the emotional baggage handling that we did not learn how to handle. So much of what you said with how you would approach something, that was happening, or saying, oh, just like you did now, like this is in our culture and you can try it, but if you forget, unlike the fork thing, I remember when I learned that there was like different forks and shit for different things. I was probably in college when I saw that. And then I got so nervous, when I started to go to things, and just the simple wording of like, it's okay if you forget, or you can try this. I feel like for my nervous system, those sort of things are so powerful. And so to be able to offer that to our children, not from a space necessarily like, you ain't got to do this if you don't want to. There are things that I don't feel like that. I feel like I wish I could see that, but everybody's going to trip if we go back home and said this and blah, blah, blah. But it's a either or thing. It's also like, okay, if you forget to do that or you don't do this time, I got you. Right. Not only is it okay, but I got you. You're not going to be standing in the middle of the room. So can we talk a little bit about that, Iris? Like some of the ways that you invite your children to consider things, but not in a way that makes it so that, you do this or everybody's screwed because nobody's going to be happy with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way I talk about it in my book is like just wrestling with the tension between respect and relationship, because obviously we want to respect our kids' boundaries. We want to respect like their temperament and their individuality, their autonomy. But we are also living in relationship. And so that means that there are things to consider. There are other people to also consider. It's not just about yourself.
Yeah.
How can we live in this, this dance of like the win-win solutions where we can feel honored and we can honor other people too. It doesn't have to be a dichotomy. It doesn't have to be like, it's like either I respect you and I feel bad, or I respect me and make you feel bad. Like there are ways that we can, do that dance and learn to live together in ways that feel good for everybody. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I think just encouraging like my kids to consider other people. Like recently we went to go visit some friends and their kids are on the spectrum. And so we just, talked to them beforehand. It's just like, oh, remember these friends, their kids are on the spectrum. And we just want you to be aware of that and sensitive to that. So we didn't tell them exactly what to do. We didn't say like, you better be nice to them and be friendly,
Right.
or else you're going to get a talking to. It was just encouraging them to be empathetic and to be understanding. And then when we were there with them, it was just really encouraging for me to see my kids like just engage with them in caring and kind ways,
Yeah.
not with prescriptive ways,
Yeah.
or where it's not about the rules. It's not about like, okay, you always need to share your toy, or it's always do whatever the guest wants. It's really from a sincere, authentic place in their heart when we point out ways that they can care for people, but it's not do this or else,
Yeah,
attitude.
exactly, exactly. Yes, yes, yes. So much in that, because those are skills that, again, like much of this, they go beyond something with your child right now. These are human relationship skills that unfortunately were not normalized in our youth by anyone, as far as I can say for myself, but that we are learning and unlearning now. And I'm seeing here in the chat how Damari and Rebecca were talking about, and I can certainly relate to how difficult it can be to have that sort of mindset and operate in that way when other adults are involved. I talked so much about early on when I used the times tables and just like little things that I'm like, okay, if you get this down, you'll be normal here. So at least you won't, like all of the ways that we are othered anyway. It often feels like we do these things with the extra layer of, okay, I don't want my kid to have another thing, or me to have another thing that I'm othered by. So when we really look at it as the responsibility of ensuring that this unschooling work is not just about our kids being happy, but it is actually how they are in relationship with other people, which is one of the things I love about what you talk about. It's both deeply personal and also very much a collective thing. A lot of different collectives, right? And yes, the othering, absolutely, Damari, because that's what we want. We want our kids to be safe. Somebody's already going to point them out for these reasons, just like I'm pointed out for these reasons. So it feels better to just let them fall in line. But we know, like, first of all, over time, it doesn't feel better. It doesn't feel better, right? Like at first it does, because it cuts the shit out, but it doesn't. And that's the thing that I love, that you not only say that it doesn't, but you talk about why it doesn't, and that element of really being able to deconstruct what some of the things are culturally that we just blindly accepted, and that we do have a right and we have ways to make different choices, because essentially that's what we're saying to our kids too. The thing isn't to just acquiesce or be violent, or be mad all the time, or we talk about the white gaze. The thing isn't to just like spend our whole lives focused on the white gaze, right? The awareness of it then develops certain other things. And I feel like you talk a lot about that, and that feels really powerful for the whole process of deconstructing this thing for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if we're just trying to protect our kids from, being bullied or laughed at, I think what that does is we're sort of reinforcing those lies again, that they are only worthy or safe or whatever if they fall in line, if they do these things. And that's something that we're trying to resist. That's the message that we're trying to resist. So when we say like, oh, you have to dress in a certain way in order to make other people feel comfortable. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of flack for that. Again, yeah, we're teaching them to see themselves through that outward gaze, instead of communicating to them that
Yeah.
you are loved and worthy and valued just as you are, apart from what everybody else says. So
Yes.
yeah, even in our fear and our desire to protect them, I think we're really communicating some damaging messages when we do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have to figure that out. We have to, for me, being in community with other people, other Black parents in particular, has been so useful around this thing, because again, my podcast started right on the heels of the murders of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, two Black men who were murdered by police. And then for us to come forward and say, how is it that I'm going to say to my kid from one side of their mouth that you are valid and whole and people don't treat you like this, and then on the other side, I want you to come home. I actually want you to come home so we can have that conversation. So and still, even with that level of the reality, and it's not even an extreme, it's the norm, it's still that the solution is not to show up better, quote unquote. That's not the solution. So we have to be in community so that we can have this type of nuanced conversation. Maybe I can't explain to my kid why. Maybe you can. Maybe someone else can, right? So like a big part of this work of liberation and deconstructing and deschooling, decolonizing is communal. You cannot do it. I don't care how connected, committed, ascended, whatever you are, you cannot do it alone, right?
Yeah,
And the how
absolutely.
is in community. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important for you to do what you're doing through the podcast and creating these communities, and just realizing that it's not like, we can do everything we can to protect our family and to create this, idyllic lifestyle. But if the world around us is still dangerous for them, or is still like communicating these damaging messages to them, like,
Yeah.
we need to think collectively too, and socially, like that justice aspect where, it's not just about me and mine and my little family, but how can we create this communal change, this collective change, so that, our kids can come home and
Yep.
we don't have to constantly be living in fear.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then speaking of locally, there's a question in here. I'm going to read it. It feels related to what we're talking about. Iris, were you unschooling at the time that you and your family were living in Edmonton, Alberta? If so, what was it like? Who was your unschooling community here? I'm an immigrant, soloish parent from Jamaica, living here in Edmonton, who is officially beginning the process of unschooling, and finding community by POC in unschooling is a major struggle here.
Yeah, I really feel that. I mean, I was a kid when I lived in Edmonton, so no, I didn't. I was not unschooling there. I did not start my family there.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I was living in China when I started unschooling, and there is not a huge community of unschooling parents in China. Surprise, surprise. But I was connected with other homeschooling, like other homeschoolers there,
Mm-hmm.
and that was actually a really good community for me. I think it's like it was helpful even though they were not unschoolers, but there were some people that were relaxed schoolers, just they were just
Yeah.
on their journey. They're on their own journey of, taking their kids out of the system and finding other ways. So I think, yeah, like that was really helpful for me to have that, even though we weren't totally on the same page with just
Yeah.
having other families that,
Same.
yeah.
Same. I don't think we knew any other unschooling families for years.
Yeah.
We didn't know any, not in real life. I mean, and then I didn't even know the term. Like all of that stuff came up way later for us. But we, to the point of like community, how that works. That's another thing that we got to think about it in a more diverse way. The same way we think about disconnecting from things or distance from things. Like you can distance physically, you can distance emotionally, you can distance logistically. Same thing with community, because for me,
Yes.
it was virtual. And I know, Shaya, I see your comment
Yes.
here, you're online, so you're fortunate in that. And not that it's the same, but I know in our experience, that's why I started writing and talking about this so much, to find other people. And some of the people I found were not my people. And then, but that's okay, because all of that was actually part of the journey. It's like, oh, they do it like this, but then this, and I don't like this part. And so there's so much discerning, there's so much deciding. Even the idea of community, I thought of community as in person, and we did things together, just like when the girls were in school and they went on field trips and blah 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 blah. It doesn't look like that now. Now it might mean that Iris and I are getting on a call and commiserating about the fact that when your kid is free, it also, you got to catch up because you weren't raised like that. So the catch up period, which is forever, can be really hard. And maybe Iris and I spend 30 minutes twice a month just commiserating about that, because she gets it and I get it, as people from different places, blah, blah, blah. That's community. That's an example of community. watching a webinar in introvert mode, to learn the basics of how people unschool but don't talk to nobody because you can't, that's community. Right? Like, it can look like a lot of different things. So we have to really move as much as we can outside of what we think we know and what we've assigned and ascribed over to, good, Amber, I'm glad that's useful, over to exploration and what that might mean. Because sometimes in the whole group of researching, you might find one person, just one, and it could be just enough, for the period of whatever it is that you're going through, because there's so many different transitions in it. And I love, Iris, that you talked about the fact that it's just people going through different parts of their journey. Like, it doesn't have to be unschoolers to be community. I know that my friend Leslie here in Atlanta has Kid Cultivators, which is really a homeschooling co-op. But in that co-op, you have everyone from people who are super, school at home, over to ones that are like, I don't even like the term unschooling. We just do whatever we do. Right. So you might find in the community of people who are super schoolish, there might be something about one of their personalities that's actually really useful for how you deal with one of your kids. So the education and community can look like a variety of things. And I imagine you found that as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I was living in China at the time, and all my exposure to unschooling ideas were really virtual, were really online. And
Yeah.
so I really gravitated to finding community, like learning from people online. And
Yeah.
I'm noticing, even like for my kids during this pandemic, that's their community too, like learning how to connect with people virtually and maintain their relationships through gaming online or
Yeah.
whatever, Zoom calling. It's just like it doesn't have to be a certain way. And I think another unschoolish idea is also, you don't have to be the same in order to be in community, right?
Yes.
Like in order, we don't have to only be unschoolers in this little, have all the same ideas about that in order to have friendship with somebody, or in
Thank
order
you for
to,
saying that. Thank you
yeah.
for saying that, because it doesn't even make sense. Yes, right. Thank you. Yes, Mama Tortuga is in the building. Hey, sis. Yes, exactly. You don't have to be. And a matter of fact, so it's tricky because on the one hand, I totally overstand why you would want that, because again, with the othering and all, it's like the frustration of being the USU in a sea of people that are just like, I don't get it. You need to change this, blah, blah, I don't understand. It can invite, right? It can feel like an urgency to find sameness. But as you are processing that, it might be useful to think that the sameness is not necessarily that something that you can readily identify. It's just same as in other people who are questioning convention, just like your family is questioning convention. That sameness, that can be enough. That alone can be enough. It could be somebody from a completely different background who has very different ideas than you do, and they're mainly homeschooling, but they can say something to you about this idea of deconstructing these conventional ideas that could change your whole shit up way different than anything you read in my book or Iris's book or whoever, like. So again, in all of this, there's constantly an invitation to say, what do I even know about fill in the blank? That's what I say to myself. I don't know. I don't know is like such a powerful thing for me. I don't know. I don't even know. because then it means that I can actually possibly find out. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Just the questioning, the curiosity, the openness. I mean, like, again, for me, if I'm hardcore, like in my own head and feel like this is the only way to do it, like, because I educate my kids at home, but then we were just part of the SDE conference, and there's also like democratic schools and like, agile learning centers. So those that are sort of outside the family,
Mm-hmm.
and if I'm just stuck in like, oh no, self-directed education needs to look a certain way, it needs to be with your parents, and then I can't build community with these other people who, for you know, it looks a little bit different, but
Yep.
then if I can find that connection, it's just like, yes, these are the values that I agree, you know, that we believe in, that we
Yep.
can question together. And
Absolutely.
yeah, that
Yeah.
it's about, it's more about inclusion and widening and like tearing down those walls instead of creating more walls, right?
Yes. Oh, goosebumps. Yes, exactly. It's a widening. It's widening. And it's also to be willing to recognize that when you move from the schoolish way over into this world of self-directedness, learning is so much more ecological. And so it's important to not try to bubble up, or stay bubbled up. Like at first, maybe being in the bubble is best. I don't know. I don't know your life. But for some people, like for us, that was important. I needed to get out of Dodge. We needed to go where our kids could walk to the shop and nobody was going to call Child Protective Services because my child went to the shop, right? We needed to do these sort of things. And a part of that also allowed for us to not be in this little bubble if we stayed in the US in the suburbs and we're like, we're just going to go to the park and the homeschooling thing where, and try to find everybody who's similar to us. Real life shit that you're not going to be able to navigate needs to happen, and it will happen anyway. So if you take that approach of, as you said, Iris, well, I'm trying to embody these skills. I am trying to learn them. I am trying to unlearn these things. And I'm going to bring that in with me everywhere. And so this parental fragility, when it shows up I love that you use that term too, when that shows up in these spaces, it isn't about me being like, what is going on? Let me react to it. No, I have a practice that I bring with me everywhere. It's messy, it's imperfect. Sometimes I don't get it, sometimes it don't work, but I bring it with me. So in that sense, it's almost like this constant invitation for community because you're bringing as much of you as you can of the practice that you're learning with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I feel
love
like I
that.
got that from your book so much, where it's like we thought about it like this and then we tried it this way. There was so much of like you being it, trying to be it and bring it and not necessarily say it or show it or convey it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because in terms of my own circle of friends, like nobody that I know is doing anything like what I was doing. But I think it was just talking about it in a way that I was like, you know, passionate about it. And I totally believed in it, and yet not in a judgmental way, not in a like, oh, you have to take your kids out of school at this very moment, otherwise you're not a good parent. You know, it's just, and I found that a lot of my friends were very curious about it. They weren't like, you are out of your mind. They were like, that's fascinating. And so much of it they could actually agree with, you know, it's just like,
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot about school that's messed up. So, you know, just letting them sit with that, letting them sit with like, oh yeah, why do we have all these tests, or why do we expect kids to do, you know, something at a certain age?
Yep.
But like talking about it in terms of my own experience and what was working for my family instead of placing a judgment on them.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm wondering too, like speaking of placing the judgment and also the resonance and all the other things, like right now in this whatever time and space we're living in, I want to know, like, how are things now that your book is out? Like what sort of, one, I want to know what you're excited about in terms of like this movement, because I know you've been part of this long before the book. We shared that as well. So like, what are you excited about? What is happening now in your world and in this world of self-directedness that you are noticing, as you're more out there now and are maybe even encouraged by? I'd love to know.
Yeah. I mean, I loved, you know, the way you titled this, you know, generational and cultural transformation, because that was really, you know, my dream. And yet I was like, I don't know what part I'm going to play in it, but I know that I need to talk about it for my own healing and just to share my story. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just been so encouraging to get feedback from people who's like, you know, when I read your book, I totally resonated with it. You know, that's my life. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for, you know, yeah, just making me feel seen and heard
Yeah.
and understood. And so that was so powerful for me because yeah, in a lot of ways I was just sharing my own experience. And then when I had the courage to do that, seeing how many other people that affected, and
Yes.
yeah, so just really really encouraged by, you know, not just hearing people from North America, but people from all over Asia really resonate with that, and
Yeah.
hoping that as more people, you know, think about these issues and wrestle with these ideas, that 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 cultural, those perspectives can slowly shift, you know, from
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
So what are you so if folks are watching this and they're like, "Oh man, like I want to get more of that." We know you have a website. You have a really, I think the last post, I didn't check today, my bad. Let me see. The last post that that you have on there, yes, parenting in a climate of anti-Asian racism. I found so just like the way that you write, it's so straightforward, which I really appreciate. Like I don't feel like I got to pontificate on shit. You're just talking. And there's so much in there that's connected to a lot of education, like real education that I get. So what are some of the things that you're doing now, Iris? Are there book clubs that we can join? How do we continue to do the work, you know, with what you've brought us through the book and your blog?
yeah. So I'm finishing up my second cohort of my Untigering book club. I'm not sure if I'm going to do another one, but Damari and I are actually going to have like an exploring unschooling. You know, we're calling it a virtual learning lab. That's
Oh,
what
I love
Damari
it.
named it. Yes, I loved it too. So just, you know, trying to invite people who are curious or who are just starting off this journey of unschooling and trying to, you know, provide them with resources and encouragement. So we're going to be doing that in July. So we'll send out more information about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like creating a membership group, just to provide more support. And I really want to connect, especially with, you know, those of Asian descent, just to provide them, like, you know, just having
Yes.
that same language that we can talk where we get
Yeah.
it, you know. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm
awesome.
considering do that.
Great. And so it's so easy to remember, untigering.com. So there's an email list so that you can get
Yes.
those updates. And I'm seeing Michelle here in the chat saying would love to be around other Asian unschoolers. Yes, y'all, we don't play these games here of trying to act like it's not a both and situation. We could do shit in our own circles and we can broaden the circles, and it's even more powerful. It's whatever we need in whatever moment. So I'm so glad that you're willing to do that, Iris, and that you're not like, everyone ever, including Asian Americans, should know. We're talking about, you know, again, even with the language in the book. Y'all, if you didn't get the book, please do that so you can like really, really see what I'm talking about, because so much of it, it felt very much too like I was a part of witnessing and being invited into elements of your culture, that you weren't writing it to make sure that I understood it, which I love. It's actually why I don't read a ton of books, because it's rare that it has that way that I love, where it's like almost like you weren't writing it for me, but it
Mm-hmm.
so was. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just divine. So I really appreciate and love what you're doing in the world. And I will be like shouting out whatever you and Damar, because you know Damar's and now you are too. So
Yes.
like whatever y'all have going on, we will make sure that we do our part to share it. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, yes. So anything else before Iris is gonna log off? She may or may not be in the chat, and then Damari is gonna come on. Not Damari. Now we've been talking about Damari.
Tirsa.
Tiersa and I are gonna do our thing and talk about all the goodness and things in between. So anything else before we wrap?
No, I'm just so grateful for, I know that, you know, you were a big, I quoted you multiple times in my book. So yeah, just like you were a big reason that I chose to unschool and felt, you know, somebody who understood my experience too, you know, as a person of color. So thank you so much for the work that you're
You are
doing.
so welcome. And I'm so glad that you're doing it too at this level, because we need it. We need it. We need it. So y'all, untigering.com. If you logged on after we started, you will get the replay of the entire thing. And of course, we'll do a little recap on Fair of the Free Child. So thank you so much, Iris, Chen,
Thank
Untigering.
you.
We will be in touch, sis. Peace.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So, close video. Boom. All right, now let me bring on Tirsa so that we can chat. That was so good, and I knew that was going to be good too. There we go. You're so welcome. Yes, yes, yes.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can, and I can see you. Pieces.
Hi. Oh my God. Let me just say, I just have to say that this is so awesome. Like just seeing you guys together, it just, like this is what I imagined when I first started unschooling. Like being in community with women of color, of all different cultures, like speaking out the liberation of us and our children. Like this is happening. Like this is happening. Like I am just so, I can't even, like, I know you brought me on
You
to
don't
talk,
need
but
to,
I'm just
right?
like, this is it, girls, we made it. Like, we made it. Like, because when I first got into unschooling, you know this, like, it was just like, I love John Hope. I love Peter Gray. You know, I love all the white men who, you know, who informed me about this. Yes, okay, great. But I was looking for you. I was looking for Iris. I was, you know, and I'm just so happy for the women and the parents, just the parents in general that come into this now and have y'all's book. You know what I mean? Like your book and Untigering, it's there. It's already there. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is what I needed. This is what I wanted. And we have it now.
Yes,
and
and
I'm
we
just
all
like,
need it in all the ways because
yes,
I need it too. You know, the kids don't
yes,
just get born and then it's like, oh, boop, there you are. We were talking about
yes.
this in the village. See, this is why I love Tia. So we always you know, we were talking about this in the village recently, Fair the Free Child Village, about the transition work and the feelings, you know, we hear, and yes, and it's going to be in Spanish too. Yes, the book. We talk about, because there are so many benefits to making this decision in every moment, because it's a decision you make a million times a day to raise free people, including self. But oh my gosh, the layers of it when you are in it, and the type of work that happens as you deconstruct and deschool can really like so to have this community where I know I'm going to log on and that Tirsa is going to show up, and that if Damari ain't on, it's because she couldn't be on, because she makes it a point to try to be on here every time. Joni, you know, just the different ways. You know, Anna Maria is going to like message me about something and I'm going to listen to it like 5 times. There's so many ways that I feel supported, and that it's okay for the process to be messy. And I think that's one of the biggest ways that this work gets derailed, because we're in these little silos. So it's like you said, Tia, so when we can know that things are happening with people who have some elements of cultural, you know, connection that are similar to ours, it's so empowering, not just for like, you know, to do it or to get into it, but also for the things in it that can like break you down, you know?
Exactly. Like I what I was just watching you ladies and I was just feeling like, oh my gosh, like this is the moment. This is what we've been waiting for. We're doing it. We're making it happen right now. And it's just so inspiring to me. And I'm hoping that it's inspiring to others so that we see more people get into the movement. Like, come on, you know, because we need everybody. Just because Akilah is doing it, just because Iris is doing it, doesn't mean we don't need your voice too.
Hello.
Like, you need to come in too. You know,
Yes,
we need to get more people, because, you know, we just need all the voices. We need all the voices. And, you know, it's great. It's great because they got all the voices on their side. And you know what I mean? When I say they, okay, they got a million different people doing the same exact thing or iterations of the same exact thing. So why can't we have a million different people in all different shades and all different, coming from the Caribbean, coming from Asia, coming from, why can't we have all that?
We can never have enough. Like, look at that. I'm
never
looking
enough.
here in the comments. Yes, Tanya, you're welcome. Being a parent of a Black and Asian, not child. She's not a child. Exactly. We need more. When people say to me, I get messages like, I started a podcast and I know you already have a podcast, but can I? I'll be like, can you not? That's the other thing that we're going to get out of, because that's also a schoolish, foolish, colonizer-minded thing, that because it's being, first of all, I can never do it like you.
Right.
And then even at a more base level, connection looks like a million different things. There's a way that Tiersa will say a thing or show up or nod her head or not say a thing that's going to connect, with Joanna in a different way than something that I do or say. So we need diversity of thought and feelings. Also, we're at different stages in the journey. So Tiersa might be super helpful with a thing that I might not even be able to connect to anymore, or vice versa. We can never have enough voices in this movement.
No, we can never have enough. And I think that a lot of the schoolishness that we have internalized is that there can only be one. So there can only be one Black woman, and that's Akilah, and there can only be one Asian woman, and that's Iris. And no, okay, everybody, like you said, everybody's saying it in a different way, and it connects in a different way because everybody has a different story to tell. And we need to start thinking about it in our community, just like, no, all of us have to say it. It doesn't matter. It's not just one person that gets to show up. No, everybody has to tell their story. And if you don't want to, that's okay. That's okay. But be a part of the crowd, like show up for the people who are talking.
Yes, exactly.
Also be a part of it. You don't have to say anything, but show up. You have to be, because the movement needs numbers. So even the people who are not saying nothing, we need you to be there too. We need you to be there listening.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I see here, Amber, that myth of the one, so toxic, right? Hella colonizer minded. There's the one moment in a million moments that we have in just the one day. Again, the village, so powerful. When I go through and read the comments, when I take the time to go in there and read, sometimes I might not even respond. I give a heart, but the time that I took to process that and what it did for me, I probably couldn't even put in words, right? So like we can show up as ourselves, whatever that means. Those of you here right now who might be watching it after and never comment, thank you. Because you showed up here true and honest. You didn't show up front and like you wanted to be answering the questions. Thank you for showing up just like this, real quiet. We feel you, right?
Yeah,
like
and that was coming through with when you guys were talking about how community doesn't just mean, people who are unschooling. It can mean so many different things. And it does for me. It means that people who are like-minded, they're not necessarily unschoolers, but they could be people who are like free-range parents. Yeah, I relate to a lot of free-range parents, and I want them in my community, like people who go to democratic schools, like, Black people, a lot of Black people who aren't yet unschooling, but they trying to figure it out. They want to know, but their kids still go to school. I want them in my community too. Like there's just so many different ways that people can show up, but you can't think that just because you're not part of that or you're not that, or just like you said, you got to show up.
No, totally. And it gives other people permission to show up too. I love that we're talking about the diversity of influence, right? Because different people impact, and I saw people put that here in the chat too, different people will impact you. When you're not thinking about education as just some shit that happens in school, it then eventually allows you to think about education and connection as something that doesn't just happen in sameness. Because I have friends, just like I think Esther was saying, whose kids are in school. Remember, unschooling is not about not school. It's about so much more. So there are children who happily consent to school, and they are in consent-based relationships with their parents who educate me about certain things through a variety of ways, of things that I might still be stuck on, some of which I don't even realize that I'm stuck on, right? Like I'm going through that right now with such a major transition, as I touched on in our village, such a major shift in how I am understanding how to mother now based on what my daughters need in this moment. Like I've been kicked out of a nest, which feels like it's really hard. And I am learning how to care for them in a way that, as Marley says, it's not just about loving her, it's about caring for her,
Right.
how she needs to be cared for now. When that's not an education that I'm going to necessarily get like just from other unschoolers. It might be people with like 30-year-old kids, you know,
Right.
who understand how to parent an adult from a respectful, consent-based space. So if I cut that out, you know, if I'd said, oh, I want to only be around unschoolers, first of all, chabu, because some of these unschoolers out here are the
Well, let me
worst.
tell you something. It's too many unschoolers out here that I would not want to be in community with. And that's not something that I thought when I first came into it. I thought that, you know, unschoolers were like, you know, no, people are not doing it for the same reasons that we're doing it. And that's something that I had to learn. Like we come to it from a place of liberation. Like we're trying to get free doing this. But a lot of people come to it from a place of trying to be better than their schooled peers. And just like you said, I feel like you can have an unschooling mindset and still go to school because it's consent. It's about consent. It's about the kids said they want to go to school, so they're going to school. Yeah, you know, and so that's the whole thing. Like that's what we're doing. You know, exactly. So, but a lot of unschoolers now that I come across now are like, no, we're one-upping the school kids, and this is the way people are going to be schooled in the future, and this is how Elon Musk does his kids college. Yeah, exactly. Like it's a good for, you know, like no, we're not doing it for that. I was never worried about if my kids was going to outshine the kids in school. I don't care about. I'm not thinking about that. You know, exactly. So like you guys were talking about, I think that is very, very important to keep reminding people that community doesn't have to just look like what you thought it was going to look like. You know what I mean? And like-minded people come in all different ways. They just doing their best they can for their family. Yeah. So it might not be unschooling the way you think it should be, but
don't focus on that. Right.
Yes. The mindset is there. And that's all I'm worried about right now. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I love that
Rebecca said, I took my kids out of school because of that kind of pressure. Right? Exactly. Yes. And it's not just, and you're so welcome, Chavi, about it not being just an alternative to school. And sometimes it can start out there, but really when people like Tiersa and I talk about it, you know, so often in all the spaces we can, it isn't a reprimand, right? It's not about what it ain't. It's an invitation about what it can be for you. It's for you to recognize that even if you started out with it being like, you know what, I want my kid to go to college. They're having a lot of problems. I'm going to take them out because this unschooling thing. Okay, if you started out there. But when you're in community in these variety of ways, there'll be a lot of unlearning. You may, I venture to say you probably will shift. You will start to know things anew. You will start to develop more keen lenses. You will become a better witness, a better observer, a different listener, so that the things that you thought was what your child needed or what you even wanted for them become at least not the only thing. It's not that they're not important. You might still have the idea that it's Yale or die. But what's going to happen is that in community with people who are in various stages of the process, you will also recognize, oh, wait, so like my kid is in a da-da-da-da, you know, you're going to connect other parts of the human experience that the school experience currently overshadows. That's kind of the default formula of schoolishness, like the student overshadows the human. And what happens is that when you're in community, you often will start to develop some of the skills for recognizing the humanness and also the inhumaneness, so that you can make, and it just puts you in some different directions, right? Which is really all we're talking about. So you can start to see this thing differently.
Right. Because, you know, a lot of us, me in particular, I came into unschooling as an educational philosophy. That was the way I came into it. Like, I don't want my kids to be in school. You know, I started homeschooling first, and then it just evolved into unschooling. Yeah. But just like you said, that part of it evolved to the point where it's not just an educational way. I realized that I had to I had to include the conscious parenting too. If I wanted this to even work, quote unquote, I needed to do the whole thing. I couldn't just be looking at the student, just like you said. I had to be looking at the whole person, the human being. So that transformed my thought process from one of, oh, this is a way that kids can learn, to, oh no, this is the way we treat people. And by people, I mean children. You know, that's what it transformed to that. And I think that this is what you guys are going to do for so many Black and Asian people and other people of color and just marginalized people. This is what you guys are going to do for them, because once they see themselves, a lot of people are not going to come into this until they see themselves. And now they see themselves, you know, and they're able to say, oh, I'm there. I'm already there, you know, and it's going to be transformative. It is transformative right now. You can see, we already see how much the village is growing. Like every single day it's growing.
I know it. It is so beautiful. And the quality of the sharing.
Oh, yes.
Again, sometimes I can't even answer.
Me too, girl.
Because I feel it so much.
I be like, what do I even say to this?
But I know we feel
let me think about this for a couple of days.
I don't feel like I have to answer everyone. Like, that's the thing. It feels good to be able to put a heart or put the hug thing or the care emoji to connect, because that's what we're learning too. We're learning that I don't have to show up like, yes, and here are my 4 answers to the 4 statements that we ain't got to do all that. It's not even that anymore, right? It's so much more. And I'm loving in here. Joni talked about how for her, it was like witnessing and observing of herself also, and which of course is going to impact how you can do all the other things. Thankfully, you don't have to have the skill first, because I would have been shit out of luck if I needed to feel free or have certain things together. Like I learned all that shit along the way, and I'm still learning. But there is very much this idea of like, when I start to recognize that this witnessing and all of this stuff, I can turn this also to myself. Matter of fact, I must.
Yeah, that's the only way it's going to happen. Yep.
I must. So then it's when you start to do that, I mean, it just opens up so much in a beautiful way, in a scary way, in a way that I feel like I'm still navigating.
I don't think you're ever going to stop. Because,
no, you're not.
Because we evolve and our children evolve. Because you were talking about how you're in a new space and, with mothering, and we've all come to that. Like when you come into unschooling, you get into a new space.
Yeah.
A million with what your role is. And now it changes again. And the thing about it is, our kids don't inform us when they transition. That's where the observer part comes in, because they could have been acting like that a long time ago, and I'm still working off this old paradigm. I'm still using this old framework that I thought that you were still doing too, but you had moved on. I didn't know.
Nobody informed me. Then when I tried to get the information, that was actually the problem.
No voice messages. And now you're going to talk about, well, Mom, you're not doing the way I need you to do. Like, I didn't know. I didn't know.
Or you needed to do this. If you would have, it's like, dude, I was so clear that I wasn't going to get everything right. And I'm trying, I was talking to my friend Leslie about this. Shout out to Leslie and Poor Podcast, Leslie Bray. We were talking about this. She came over the other day and we were just basically like co-balling, about this way that you are not informed. And then when sometimes the way that you get informed, so you got to sit with your little hurt feelings, right? And then the discerning between the moments when I do need to sit with my little hurt feelings, and the other moments when it's like, yeah, nah, bruh, right? Like the whole.
You got to push back a little bit.
A lot of it. And then what that means, because I'm still in this position of power. I am still the holder of the baggage of the times you couldn't say what you wanted. Like in our case, because I was physically violent to my kids. So it's like there's so many layers of what it looks like. So no matter where you feel like you've arrived, first of all, you're correct, you've arrived, and also there's another destination. So we cannot focus on the destination.
No,
we cannot focus on deschooling for a year, for every 6 months, whatever that dumb shit. Like you got to really just be in community. You got to be willing to witness You got to be willing to say, whether it's in community or to a therapist or to a friend or whatever, because these shifts are portals. And if we're not in community, they don't feel like portals. You know, it just feels like shit, and then we avoid it.
That's what it feels like. It feels terrible. It feels like, why didn't I know? Why wasn't I paying attention? You know, and then also they're coming at you in their way that they do because they're not, you know, mature enough to say it in a way that, you know, so it's like, ooh, okay. You know, but this is why it's so important that you're here. And it's so important that we have the village and everyone to talk to, because there's people that have 8-year-olds right now while we're dealing with teenagers, and our stories help them, you know, understand what they might see in the future and how we dealt with it. Not saying, just like you and I were saying, not saying this is the only way.
No, not at all.
But this is the way that I figured out. This is how we got through it as a family. That is so important that people know this and hear these stories.
It's healing. That's what it is for me and for so many of us. It's healing, because it's not, you know, it's healing from many things, including the guruism, the idea that if I get the right parenting book and read it really good and do the things exactly how they say.
That's still schoolish.
And it's impossible because of all these different portals, the ways that our children, you know, are learning themselves. Like I'm still learning myself. That's why Joni's statement is so powerful, that it is also witnessing myself. And it also goes back to the question Shai had asked before. It wasn't Shai that asked that question. It was someone who called in about intergenerational, like how do you deal with your adults with the thing? This is a part of how, because when you get to listen and be and take it in and process the shit and know that nobody out here has it quote unquote right or perfect, and that there is no final destination. All of it is just like process and portal and trust. What that does for me is it makes it that I'm stronger. I am a stronger unschooler, in that my bounce back in the moments when I, you know, do go to the place like where I am now, where it's like, fuck the shit, you know, like Joanna mentioned, that feeling of like, does it even matter? You know, those are feelings that I navigate, like, you know, but I'm in community. So my other unschooling mom friend, Kelly, is like, actually, Akilah, no matter what happens with our kids, no matter how they react, what you are doing, this level of mindfulness, the level of presence, the fact that you're willing to do it out loud is exquisite. Like, this is the work. It's not the result. She said that shit on my WhatsApp, and I downloaded it and cried to it like 4 times since she shared it.
Because that's true. And it's something
but
that
that's
you need
what
to
I
hear.
needed to hear. Yes, and that's what this is about. Like, what do you need? You don't even know sometimes what you need, but if you go out there a little bit, somebody might give you something that you really could take the shit and be like, okay, thanks guys, bye. I'm gone for 2 weeks. I'm about to be with this. And that's what we want. That's why we're doing this. We want that for all of us because we need it.
That's right. We absolutely need it. And, you know, it's just so great. I'm just so thankful and grateful to have come into this community when I did, you know. Same. And I'm just grateful for all the sisters that was here before me, which is just you, pretty much you. But I'm happy to see all the people that are coming in now. It is just like you said, all the different voices, and I'm like, oh yeah. Like when I look on the village and I read, I'm like, yeah, I never even thought about it like that.
That's right. That's right.
That's amazing. You know, and I'm just so grateful because she's right. It is just the work. It's what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, you know, these kids are going to be kids in the same way that they would have been if we sent them to school or if we didn't send them to school. These are children and we're their parents and we're navigating this.
Yeah.
You know, I remember the day as human beings, like I remember the day I figured out that I was like, oh, for some reason I had got it in my head that unschooling was going to eliminate these things. Or, you know, like I had got it in my head, like
actually,
if I do something different,
it puts a big focus on it. Actually.
I feel like it makes more conflicts because all the conflicts that the school,
I would agree.
I could have said, well, it's coming from the school. It's not from me. You know what I mean? I had someone else to blame.
Absolutely.
When the school was there, but when the school's not there,
so much, like
it's like, oh, hold up, it's just me. It's just me.
Yep.
Hold on. You know what I mean? And it's like, so the conflict is real. This is real, you know?
It is, Tirsa. I'm sorry for speaking over you.
Oh,
And
no, go ahead, girl.
and not only is it like kids are going to be kids, as my friend said when she gave me that word that I needed, humans surprise us all the time. These things are not just about our kids being whatever term we want to use. Sometimes it's immaturity, which happens in all people, not just kids. Sometimes it's lack of context, because if you're only these many years old on the planet, you might not have experienced these things. And other times it's just that humans surprise us all the time. I surprise myself, you know what I'm saying? I'm my human, and I surprise myself all the time. So it is ridiculous for me to think, even though I still think it now, today, June 7th, that I won't be surprised by things that my kids do, or that I shouldn't be, or that when they do something surprising, I should have exactly the tools to, you know, to navigate it. That's how I feel right now. So being in community, you know, seeing what Deanna's posting, seeing things that Amber's like, I'm in a portal right now, like all of these things, they remind me, you know, I get to observe myself through y'all's eyes, essentially, and be like, bitch, do not sit up here and try to act like you're supposed to have all the answers for whatever reasons. Like, do not do that. Don't get lost in that. So I love and appreciate this space so much. What everybody brings. And I'm so glad, Tirsa, that you said, hey, we need more voices. Like, not because one person, like that to me is such a huge takeaway.
I keep saying it because I remember how I felt before I came into the space. I remember feeling like, okay, well, Akilah's already there. So, you know, let me just, she's saying it, and she's saying everything that I want to be saying anyway. So let me not. But I was like, no, I remember I heard you say something, and it was, actually it was on one of my YouTube videos. And you said, thank you for posting this about unschooling, because we need more people who look like you, who are like you.
I remember when I was
saying that. Yes. And I was like, oh, she's right. That, I mean, just that one comment. Absolutely. I was like, why was I thinking that? It just, you know what I mean? Like, why did I have that in my mind? You know, it's one of those thoughts that I know was put there, and it's not mine. Somebody gave that to me and I just ran with it. But just you breaking that, just you saying that one thing broke it. So when you did that for me, I'm like, oh, I could do that for other people too.
And that you are. And
I
you
can
do
be
it for
where
me
Akilah's
also.
not. I can, you know what I mean? Like, you know.
And where I am. Thank you.
And where you are. And where you are. That's right. But that's what got me thinking, you know? And I was like, oh, if she's this to me, I can be that to someone else. And I just need other people to know that is you too.
Yes.
That's you too. And you can also be that for me. And you can also be that for Akilah. You know, like, we need you here. We need you here. And I know every time I get on these crowdcasts, I know I say that, but I really want people to know.
I rely on you saying that, because
and it really came out today when I saw you and Iris sitting there, you know, and I was just like, yes, this is everything. This is everything we need, and we need more of it.
Thank you so much.
You know, I'm ready to see some men. I need some more men.
Oh, we do it. Listen, the last
that's what
two episodes
the
of
dads
the podcast
need to come over.
The last 2 episodes, Chris and I are going to be talking about reparenting, and I'm talking specifically with him, offering some invitations for other men folk to be in these conversations. Because like you, Tirsa, I am like, I don't, frustrated is not even the word, because I know it's not that they're not dads out there, right? We have Nick, there's I think his name is Nick Hess. I'm forgetting what his tag is online, but that's an unschooling dad, Latinx dude that I found out about a while back. You know, there are a few folks, but not enough. Thank you, the unschooled dad. Yes. So we need more of men's voices in the mix, because it's also such an invitation for other people, not just for other men folk. So every time you're on, again, there's so much that you offer. You know, you are it for me, just like I'm it for you and Iris, all of us who are doing this. I mean, so many names, people who show up in here once again. So it's just so important that we name the people who are doing the work. And I also wanted to say, when you said it was just me, I get why you're saying that. And also we're continuing to learn that it looks like a bunch of different things. So for example, Toni Morrison, who is not an unschooler, who ain't got nothing to do with the unschooling movement, quote unquote, has been there for me and lots of other Black women who do mother work and call it whatever they called it. Thank you, Joni, with Fear of the Free Man Child, with Anthony. Yes. So we begin also to recognize that the work is actually available for us in many, many, many,
That's
many ways.
absolutely true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because but you know what? Now that I'm in it, I can see it more outside.
True.
You know what I mean?
True.
You're absolutely right. I go back and I read stuff and I'm like, oh, there it was. It was right there all the time. But
Yes.
I wasn't, you know what I mean? I wasn't aware of that until
exactly. Yeah,
until my mind was opened up and I think about things in that way now. So you're absolutely right. It was always there.
Yes, yes. And I know why you say what you said too. Hi, okay, so my niece, and it's her birthday this past. Hey, just say.
Oh.
So perfect timing too, because we're gonna wrap it. I so love and appreciate you, Tiersa, every time.
Oh yeah, and thank you for letting me be here with you. Oh my gosh, I can't even, like, you and Irish Chen. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm fangirling out right now.
It's so funny.
This is also so amazing. Oh, it's awesome.
It's beautiful.
I'm just so
every
grateful.
Time. You're so welcome. I love and appreciate you so much, Tiersa. We will be doing more of these, so we have others. I'm so excited.
Oh yeah, and I'm always going to be here, popping up, saying what I got to say.
And thank all of you for being here. It is just so beautiful to be in community in this way too. So thank you. Love you. The recap of this will be on next week's episode of Fear the Free Child. And then, of course, stay connected. You're registered here, so you'll get invitations for all the upcoming ones too. Love y'all. Thank y'all. Peace, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.